Hello. Thank you so much to the Grapevine Garden Club for inviting us to speak today. My name is Betsy Marsh, and I work for the Tarrant Regional Water District as a conservation supervisor. It is my pleasure to present to you your speaker today, my son, Mason Marsh. Mason is a freshman at Texas A&M in College Station studying ecology and conservation biology. He is an eco rep for his dorm, a member of the Fisheries Club, and the Society for Conservation Biology. Mason is a graduate of Colleyville Heritage High School and a recipient of the Grapevine Garden Club Scholarship. From a very early age, it was clear that he was captivated with nature. He spent much of his childhood outdoors exploring in our gardens, often looking for insects, especially caterpillars, that he affectionately called murs at the tender age of 2. His love for nature carried through to elementary school, where he brought his extensive insect collection for show and tell, to middle school, where he did his first research survey to understand why people fear insects, and into high school, where he studied the decline of the American bumblebee and many other environmental topics. Along the way, he helped me to build and tend to a large garden at his elementary school, and to our native perennial flower beds and a large vegetable garden. In high school, during the summers, he worked at the Capel Farmers Market and volunteered at the River Legacy Nature Center to remove invasive plants. During his junior and senior year, he was president of the Colleyville Heritage High School Environmental Club. And during that time, he applied for and received the Grapevine Garden Club Civic Seed Grant to create beautiful native plant landscaping in the front entrance of his school. During his senior year, in his AP research class, he decided to research opportunities for increasing native plant abundance in residential landscaping. And he's here today to present the results of his research study. Please join me in welcoming Mason Marsh.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to share my results. I'm going to get started as soon as I share my screen here. I'm just getting over a cold, so I apologize if my voice is a little gravelly. All right, is that visible?
Yes.
Awesome. Amongst an upcoming election, an unstable climate, intense foreign conflict, and out-of-control gun violence, why should Americans think about their lawns? Well, really, they shouldn't. We shouldn't. Instead, what we should be thinking about is what our lawns used to be. Hi, as y'all know, my name is Mason Marsh, and I'm here to tell y'all that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And what I mean is contrary to people's perception that a grass lawn is part of a healthy, natural suburban environment, our lawns represent a greater threat to the environment than most people realize. The key part of this threat is that in totality, turf grass takes up over 50 million acres of land in the United States. 50 million acres for a crop that is neither consumed nor used for energy production. 50 million acres for a plant that requires lawn mowing, excessive watering, pesticides, and fertilizers. 50 million acres of land that have replaced a vital part of our ecosystems that many Americans have seemed to forget about. And that is native plants, which can be defined as plants that occur naturally in a place where they have evolved. And of course, it's not just our lawns that have replaced the native plants. As we urbanize, the habitat for native plants just keeps on decreasing. But the topic of concern is that as we're clearing the land, we're choosing to cover it with turf grass instead of native plants. And now I've brought you to the question, just what do native plants bring to the table that turf grass does not? Well, this could take up another presentation, but I've boiled the benefits down into 3 bubbles that go hand in hand. First, having native plants in your landscape reduces the amount of resources that you would be spending on turf grass. The more native plants in your yard, the less you have to mow, the less you have to put out fertilizer and pesticides, and the less you have to water your yard. Second, having native plants in your yard helps to restore air and water quality. When you're mowing your lawn less CO2 is being released into the air. And when you're using less fertilizers, pesticides, and water, there's going to be less toxic runoff. In addition, native plants help to sequester carbon, which results in less CO2 being in the air as well. The third, and arguably the most important reason to include native plants in home landscapes, is the protection of biodiversity. Native plants host incredibly more amounts of biodiversity than turf or other alien species do, and adding native plants to your landscape helps decrease the amount of fragmentation between environments and provides a lifeline to both stationary and migrating wildlife. Now, given the importance of native plants and the threat from our lawns, what does prior research have to say about the willingness and preferences of homeowners when it comes to including native plants in residential landscapes? Over these next couple of slides, we're going to look at people's perceptions of native plants over time, barriers that have held back native plants, and finally, concerns that people have regarding their landscapes. However, first, I want to show people the locations of the previous studies on the US map. Of the 20 plus studies that I reviewed, none of the subject locations were in Texas. I want to point this out because it's part of the justification for my research gap. Texas has 5 out of the 15 largest cities in the United States, just making it a very relevant study location. In an effort to increase the abundance of native plants in residential yards, one of the most important aspects to consider is the attitudes that homeowners have about native plants in general. Several studies have looked at this, mostly by way of survey, and have come to relatively similar results. Gillis and Swims from the University of Pennsylvania state, quote, early research highlights preferences for traditional, neat, and ecologically deficient landscapes, end quote. But their study describes how recent research is suggesting the emergence of positive attitudes about native plants. However, just because a person may view native plants in a more positive light does not mean that they're going to alter their landscape to incorporate them. As Larson from the University of Arizona states, quote, social, financial, and other constraints often prevent direct correspondence between attitudes and behavior, end quote. Now that we have a general idea of attitudes toward native plants, the next step is to understand what barriers prevent the incorporation of native plants into residential landscapes. Davis and Stoiko from the Air Force Academy recently conducted a survey in Ohio regarding this topic. They found that the highest ranked barriers were a lack of pleasing visuals, high maintenance, and a high growth rate. Nassar from the University of Michigan in 2009 found that the situation of a house strongly impacts the level of native plants in a yard. For example, homeowner associations often have restrictions for certain plants, and it has been pointed out that one yard is more likely to follow the trend of all the other yards in a neighborhood and therefore conform to the classic turfgrass lawn. Understanding these barriers is important in the effort to increase native plant abundance in residential yards. However, there is a potential alternative way to increase native plant abundance which has not been thoroughly explored. A study by Hurd from the University of New Mexico revealed that 40% of the survey respondents were discontent with their yards. But the study did not reveal any specific concerns. The idea of homeowner discontent sparked an idea inside of me. If homeowners are concerned about their yards, they might they must not be satisfied and might be willing to make changes even if it wasn't from a pro-environmental viewpoint. I developed my research question from this idea. I wanted to figure out 3 things. To what extent do homeowner concerns about their yards or about existing landscapes, perceived barriers to addressing their concerns, and perceptions of native plants determine potential pathways for increasing the abundance of native plants in residential areas? Just like most of the studies I reviewed, in order to answer my research question, I needed to access the thoughts of homeowners. To do this, I created a multi-level questionnaire. I first asked respondents about any landscaping concerns that they had in their front or backyards. Next, they answered a series of questions regarding their average outdoor water usage. And finally, I asked them about their general knowledge of native Texas plants. I chose to distribute my survey throughout the city of Grapevine, within the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan statistical area. I chose Grapevine based on its median household income, which is slightly higher than that of which is slightly higher than the median household income of Texas, but not exceedingly higher like the cities of Southlake and Colleyville. Having a slightly higher median household income is important because it's representative of people with more means to make changes to their landscape, while still representing the state of Texas overall. Additionally, choosing Grapevine allowed me to access stakeholders who were more willing to take my survey, given the fact that I was a Colleyville Heritage High School student. To distribute the surveys, I linked the survey to the back of a paper flyer, which I taped to the mailboxes and doors of 845 single-family households, which were part of 25 randomly selected subdivisions in order to ensure a range of respondents from various socioeconomic backgrounds. Out of the 845 surveys distributed, I received 162 responses, a 19.2 response rate, or 19.2% response rate. Of the respondents, 100% were single-family homeowners, 98% were Grapevine residents, and 44% belonged to a homeowner association. I developed 5 hypotheses to guide my analysis of my topic. My first hypothesis is that most homeowners have highly ranked landscape concerns that can be addressed by using native plants. And I say highly ranked or substantial landscape concerns, and this means that over 50% of respondents rated a landscape concern at a 3 or higher on the scale below, where 1 is unconcerned and 5 is highly concerned. Five landscape concerns met these criteria. We can see that 63% of respondents said that their turf grass won't grow well. 61% said that their turf grass requires too much water. 54% said that turf grass requires too much maintenance and landscaping requires too much water. And 51% said that their landscaping design is unattractive. My second hypothesis was that most homeowners were unaware that native plants can help solve some of their landscaping concerns. I based this hypothesis off of a lack of knowledge of native plants from previous studies. However, 70% of homeowners actually were aware that native plants could resolve some of their landscape concerns. In particular, more than 60% of homeowners indicated native plants could help address these 5 concerns: that landscape design requires too much water, trees and shrubs require too much water, there's not enough birds, butterflies, and other desirable wildlife, and that flower beds require too much water and too many chemicals and treatments. I also asked respondents to list any general benefits that they had about native plants, and 72 respondents said that native plants use less water, 57 said that native plants are adapted to climate, and 38 said low maintenance. So these were the 3 highest benefits that respondents said they had about native plants. I also, in an open-ended question that was not required, asked homeowners to list any positive native plant experiences that they've had. And so I listed a couple that represented the majority. They're beautiful, interesting, and people enjoy the variety. Turk's cap and sage are 2 of my favorites. Love that they endure the super hot summers and thrive. I get to see more butterflies and birds in my yard than my neighbors. And they tend to last a little better than non-natives. My third hypothesis, I speculated most homeowners would be willing to try native plants if doing so could help them address their landscape concerns. And I was right. An overwhelming 95% said that they were willing to use native plants to address their landscape concerns. So it's broken down in the pie chart below, where we can see that the 3, 4, and 5, red, blue, and green, accumulate to 95% of respondents who are willing to add native plants to their yard to address their landscaping concerns. In particular, there were 2 landscape concerns in which um, a high amount of homeowners said that native plants could help address. So 74% of homeowners said that they were willing to use native plants to address the concern that their turf grass design is unattractive, while 64% said that they were willing to use native plants to address the concern that their turf grass requires too much water. For my fourth hypothesis, I speculated that homeowners with more knowledge of native plants would be more willing to use native plants to address their landscaping concerns. And the analyses that I conducted showed, uh, well, perhaps the linear regression, which has a correlation of 0.133, which is a very slight positive trend, indicates to some extent that homeowners with more knowledge are very slightly more willing. And in the comparison of means to the right, we see a decrease and then a sharp increase when knowledge increases. And so I attributed this trend to perhaps homeowners with a level of knowledge of one, which is no knowledge really, perhaps were more willing to add native plants because they weren't really sure if they had if they could or could not, but were optimistic. And then homeowners with a level 2 or 3 knowledge, which is a very slight low level of knowledge, maybe had perceptions of native plants that they were messier, unattractive, and didn't really fully understand the benefits of native plants, and therefore they were less willing. But as knowledge increased up to a 4 and 5, homeowners, the respondents who had a stronger knowledge of native plants recognized the capabilities of native plants to address their landscaping concerns and therefore were more willing. And that was my interpretation of that trend. For my fifth hypothesis, I speculated that homeowners would have substantial barriers to addressing their landscape concerns. And indeed, there were substantial barriers. Over 50% of respondents rated a lack of knowledge, a lack of time, a lack of money, and a lack of skill as barriers to addressing their landscape concerns, while only 40% noted a lack of interest. I also wanted to know if homeowners had barriers to using native plants in their landscapes, and it was surprising that 35% said that there were no barriers, while 29% said lack of time, 23% said lack of knowledge, 21% said lack of availability of native plants, and 19% said a lack of interest. I also, just like I asked for general benefits, I also asked respondents to list any general drawbacks they had of native plants. And it was interesting that more than 50 respondents said that native plants were unattractive, while almost the same amount said that native plants had no drawbacks. So I thought that was interesting. And I also asked homeowners to list in an open and free response question that was not required any negative native plant experiences that they have had. And so I listed a few that summarize the majority, including unsure how to maintain, attract stinging insects, not sure best ones to maintain, potentially more expensive, not what a landscape designer necessarily recommends. Typically, Texas plants I would think of as dry and not luxurious. And finally, not the standard cosmetic of suburban living. Now, given these results, what do they imply? Over these next couple of slides, I'm going to share my analyses of the data and the subsequent recommendations for increasing native plant abundance in residential yards. Based on this study's finding, focusing on homeowners' landscape concerns is a viable strategy for increasing native plant abundance because native plants can help solve some of homeowners' top concerns, namely that too much watering, unattractive design, and that turf grass is difficult to maintain. So a strategy that might work would be to promote native plants as solutions for these top concerns, which would be reducing water use, providing turf grass alternatives, and making landscapes more attractive. Given that the majority of homeowners are aware native plants can be used to reduce watering, or can be used to reduce watering their landscapes, decrease chemical and treatment use, increase desirable wildlife, efforts to educate the public about these native plant benefits have seemed to be relatively successful. However, to the extent that homeowners' awareness of native plants' usefulness will motivate them to seek native plants to address their landscaping concerns. This research suggests that educating homeowners about native drought-tolerant turf grasses, as well as native ground covers that offer lawn alternatives, could be beneficial because homeowners were not very knowledgeable about the capabilities of native plants to address problems about their turf grass is what we learned in the results. So the fact that 95% of homeowners expressed willingness to use native plants to address their landscaping concerns in general indicates that the public is surprisingly open to utilizing native plant-based solutions, and that marketing native plants as solutions to landscape concerns could be successful. In particular, based on homeowners' willingness to use native plants for specific concerns, marketing strategies focused on how native plants can increase the visual attractiveness of home landscapes and decrease watering needs could be well received. Given that the results showed an increase in knowledge predicted an increase in willingness to use native plants to address landscaping concerns, it would be beneficial to continue outreach efforts for native plant education. Furthermore, the results showed that most people received their knowledge online, and that most willingness to add native plants to address landscaping concerns came from homeowners educated by local organizations and master gardeners, and I actually didn't include that information in my previous results slides. But we can conclude that it would be beneficial for these groups to continue to promote their content or start promoting their content online and through social media. Regardless of homeowners' awareness of native plants and their willingness to use them in their landscapes, their perceived barriers to addressing their landscape concerns must be overcome in order to significantly increase native plant abundance. As a review, homeowners said that they were significantly constrained to address their landscape concerns by a lack of time, money, abilities, and knowledge. And many of them said that native plants were unattractive and time consuming. This data tells us that any successful effort to increase native plant abundance will focus on increasing homeowners' knowledge of the variety and usefulness of native plant species suitable for home landscapes, decreasing the time required to locate native plants and make small, meaningful changes to their landscapes, making native plants available at lower costs, and educating homeowners on how to successfully plant and maintain native species in their home landscapes. Several limitations should be taken into account in the interpretation of this study. First, the study was conducted during the winter season when non-evergreen plants are dormant, watering needs are low, and homeowners are not focused on enjoying or maintaining their landscapes. This timing likely influenced the results to some degree. Second, approximately 60% of respondents indicated having native plants in their yard, yet the survey collected no data regarding the type of native plants, allowing for the possibility that many homeowners were referring to native trees in their yard, which are featured in most grapevine yards. Third, the survey did not query to when or why native plants were added to the landscapes. For example, if they are planted prior to the purchase of the home or were added for a specific purpose. Lastly, the analyses rely on respondents' self-characterization of their landscape and their knowledge of native plants and what they perceive about their landscape and native plants may not be accurate. Before I conclude my survey, looking at the information presented in the survey, think about your yard. Do you have concerns that native plants could address? If so, I have several great resources that could help you get started, including the Tarrant Regional Water District, the Native Plant Society of Texas, the Lady Bird Johnson Wildlife Center, and of course, my mom. And that concludes my presentation. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Mason. This recording is being made following a live presentation at the September Grapevine Garden Club meeting. But during that meeting, there were several questions asked by members of the Garden Club that were attending. And I'd like to share a few of those questions for you to answer again. Mason, have you shared the results of this study with any local news outlets or organizations?
I have shared the results of this. I've shared my research paper with the past president of the Native Plant Society of Texas, who presented it to a board meeting. I haven't shared it with any other local organizations besides that, though.
And I would like to add that if you reach out to the Tarrant Regional Water District at savetarrantwater.com in our general contact and you ask about this study, we would be happy to share a copy of it with you. Mason, for your second question, there was some concerns brought up about the ability of yard professionals who typically focus on mowing folks' yard and occasional pruning. There was concerns expressed about their ability to actually maintain native perennial gardens and concern that they are not prepared and don't have the skill and expertise. Do you have any ideas or for how we could address that concern?
Well, first of all, I do agree that there is the concern regarding the lack of the knowledge of landscaping companies and professionals about native plants, and that it could be a reason why there's a lack of abundance of native plants is that they're not being emphasized by these kind of landscape crews and companies. And I think a great way to change that is providing education, but the question is how, and that um, perhaps local organizations like the Master Gardeners or garden clubs or the Water District could reach out to local landscaping crews and sort of reach a partnership about centered around education of native plants, helping to provide insight on how to identify and maintain native plants, and also it could result in promotion for the landscape companies, so mutual benefit.
Thank you. Absolutely agree. Tarrant Regional Water District already does offer a Green Pros training program for irrigation professionals. So I think that that's something that we should definitely look into extending some education programs for yard professionals and landscapers. All right, the final question was, Mason, there's some interest in by a garden club member in helping to organize a green living fair here in Grapevine. Would you be interested in being a part of that?
Well, Green Living Fair definitely sounds exciting, and I would like to be a part of it. I think it'd be great to see something like that here in Grapevine, so I appreciate the thought about it.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mason. And thank you again to the Garden Club for this opportunity to share Mason's research.
Thanks for having me.